Okay, in this video what we're going to do is we're going to demonstrate how to install Debian the hard way. The easy way would be simply click graphical installer, click next, 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 all the way through, allowing Debian to choose the correct options for us. However, we're going to change some of those options as we go through here. So let's go ahead and get started. Instead of using the graphical install, we're going to use the standard regular install down here. And both the graphical install and the regular install ask the exact same questions in the exact same order. The difference is the graphical install allows you to use your mouse to click options and buttons, where the install does not. So once we hit the install, this is going to fire up what's known as a TUI, or a text user interface. All right. So to navigate through this, we use the tab button, the space button, the enter key, and the up and down arrows. Tab goes between sections, space selects, enter is enter, and then the directional arrows, or the arrow keys, will take the place of the mouse pointer by moving the cursor between selectable items. All right, so we're going to choose English, United States, American English. Okay, this is just asking for the host name of the computer. If you're used to Windows or Mac, this question is hardly ever asked of you. It's just selected automatically. But each computer has to have its own unique name. And in this case, we're just going to leave this as Debian. You can name yours whatever you want, like VM1 or whatever. Excuse me. We're going to leave the domain name blank. Okay, on this screen here, on most Linux distributions, when you install it, the root user is disabled, and the first user you add to the system has what's known as sudo access. If you want that behavior, you want to leave this root password blank. However, if you're wanting to set up something that has an active root user and you want to be able to explicitly allow who gets sudo and who does not, then go ahead and put your root password in here. However, we want the former, so we're just going to hit enter twice. Now we want the name of the first user, and then their username. I'm just going to go LTL for Linux Tech Life, and I can tab between items, but from here I can just simply hit enter. And now we're going to choose a password. Okay, and since I'm in the United States, I'm also in the Central Time Zone. Okay, this is one of those places where you start clicking next, next, next when you do it the easy way. What we're going to do here is we're going to set the partitions up manually. That is part of the quote-unquote hard way. Manual, and I've got two drives. I've got one here, which ultimately I'm going to put the operating system itself on, and then this 120 gig drive, I am going to mount that on home. That way we can keep our personal files away from the system files. It's a physical separation. These represent two completely different hard drives. What this also does is, in the event that you fill up your home directory, it does not bleed over into the system and therefore create like an unstable system. This will just say, sorry, you're out of drive space, even though you still have plenty of drive space perhaps on the first drive. These are blank drives, so they are considered what's known as uninitialized, which we'll do now. So select the drive, hit enter, and yes, we want to create a new partition on there. Okay, on that, what we want to do is create a partition, and this is going to be for our EFI boot partition. And I always give it 50 meg. It never uses that much, but so be it. So continue. I'm going to place that at the beginning of the drive, so it's going to be the first partition. And this is going to be an EFI system partition. And it automatically set the boot flag to on. And we are done with that. All right, so we go back down here because we're going to set up another partition. And this is going to be our swap space, which I'm just going to assign 2 gigs. Now, asking how much swap you need is like asking which is better, Ford or Chevy, or asking who makes a better CPU, Intel or AMD. You will get zealots from both sides of the fence throwing rocks at you simply for asking the question. However, the answer is that depends. It depends on how much RAM you have, the speed of the RAM, the speed of the processor. What are you going to be doing? Are you just basically setting up a simple system to where you just navigate the web using a browser and nothing else? That sort of thing. So there's a lot of variables in there. There's no concrete answer. However, a general, and I mean very general, blanket rule I use is if you have less than 2 gigs of RAM, you want at least 2 gigs of swap, up to 4 gigs. Okay, so you can have 2 gigs of RAM and 4 gigs of swap. What swap does is it just adds additional memory to the system on the hard drive in case your RAM gets full. That's why it's dependent on what you're doing. If you have one web browser and 200 tabs open, you're probably going to hit your swap file. If you don't, you just do email and maybe watch YouTube videos, and that is the bulk of your computing, then you may never hit your swap file. If that makes sense. So, up to 2 gigs, you should have 2 gigs. You can have 4 if you want. 4 gigs or more, I just stick to 2 gigs. In fact, I allocated 4 gigs of RAM to this virtual machine, and I'm only giving it 2 gigs of swap. And chances are likely we'll never touch it. Okay, now we're also going to place this at the beginning. But it's the beginning of the available drive space. So this, you have the EFI boot partition, and then you'll have the swap. So basically this is saying this is the second partition on the disk. And we're going to leave that at ext4, and we're going to mount that on just slash, or the root of the drive, or the root of the system, and we are done here. Okay. So for the third partition, I'll highlight this, create a partition. It's going to be the remainder of the disk. We're going to leave it at ext4. I messed that up. I need to go back. This needs to be swap. There we go. That looks a lot better. Okay. So I'm going to leave that in the video to show you that while you're setting this up, before you hit finish partitions, you can change this around any way you want. If you accidentally, like I just did, made that the home partition instead of the root partition, you can go back and change it. Okay, just like this one here should not be home. This actually needs to be root. So we'll take that and we change the mount point to root. There we go. That looks better. So we're going to do the same thing for the second virtual disk. We need to initialize it first. And on here, we're going to put this whole thing on a single partition, and we kind of call it home, which Debian was smart enough to detect that. So we're done with that partition. So we have our EFI partition space. We have our swap. We have the root of our file system, and we have a separate home partition. Now you can go all out and go crazy and put every single mount point, every single empty directory on its own partition. You can put it on its own drive. That's really outside the scope of this video. However, that works basically the same as what we're doing. You just slice it up into the pieces you need, whatever size you need, and tell it where to mount it. But for here, this looks good, so we'll go ahead and finish and write our changes. Okay, so I just unpaused the video. I paused the video so you didn't have to watch that boring progress bar go across. It has installed the base system already. So this question here is asking, do you need to scan any additional installation media? 99% of the time the answer to this question is no. This is probably an old relic of back in the day when you had to have multiple CDs to install the system. So we're going to go ahead and choose no here. This is where we're going to choose where we want our repositories to come from. Again, I live in the United States, so we're going to choose United States, and I'm just going to go with the default, which is deb.debian.org. You can choose any of these mirrors you want, especially if you find one faster than the other, but I'm just, for this purpose, I'm just going to choose the standard one. Do not need an HTTP proxy. If you do, put in your credentials here. If you do not know what an HTTP proxy is, there's a chance, a very, very good chance you don't need one. So just hit enter. All right, so what it's doing there is it's just updating its files. Now it's going to upgrade software. I'm going to pause the video again until this is done. Okay, on the screen here, this is the popularity contest. This is actually telemetry, or it's actually data collection. However, you notice that it is opt out by default. So it will not send anything to anybody until you explicitly say yes, which is how these things should work. All this is going to do is it's going to send a non-personal information about your computer, the packages you installed, what your hardware is, that kind of thing, to the development team of Debian. But it's completely up to you whether you choose yes or no. That's the left and right arrow keys. But for my purpose, we're just going to say no. And we'll let that run. So this is also part of the hard way. If we were to just hit enter, it would automatically install GNOME for us. That's the easy way. So what we're going to do is we're going to deselect these. Again, space bar selects and deselects. Mouse is, that cursor is moved with the up and down arrow keys. It's very important that you leave this bottom one in here, the standard system utilities, or you'll have even more fun later. You can choose SSH server here if you need to SSH into your virtual machine later. This particular case we will not. So I'm just going to take all of the asterisks out, and except for that bottom one, and hit continue or enter. I will pause the video while these install. Okay, so we made it to this part here. This is actually the end of the installation of the base system. Remember, we don't have a graphical user interface just yet. We won't install that until after we boot into Debian for the first time. This is going to emulate something very similar to the way Arch works. Once you install Arch, it boots for the first time, and you have to go and install the graphical interface yourself. So basically what we're going to do here is we're just going to hit continue, and it's going to reboot. When it comes back, we are at our first boot screen and to our first login prompt, which we will go ahead and log in. LTL and our super secret password. Okay, I'm going to do a Control L to clear that screen. Okay, so what I'm going to do is the df-h here. This is going to list the size of the mounted partitions, the disk space that's being used currently. The third line downward says dev VDA3, 18 gigs, used 1.7 gigs, available 15 gigs. It's 11% of the drive, and it's mounted on root. If you scroll down a little further, you see VDB1. There's only 40 kilobytes being used out of the home partition. Again, that's a completely different drive. It's not even the same hard drive. So let's say we wanted to get rid of, like, say, the tempfs stuff that's in there. We don't want to see what the temporary folders look like, the temporary mounts. So what we're going to do is do a Control L to clear the screen. I'm going to up arrow, I'm going to space pipe grep -v. V means exclude. And then do tempfs. This time when I hit enter, it only shows me the disk space that's actually being mounted because it is excluded the tempfs. I can also do the same thing with that udev. Up arrow again, pipe grep -v, udev. And then there you go. We will do more on command stacking, piping, grepping, all that other stuff in other videos. I just wanted to show you something really quick, really cool, so you can see the progress, so you can see how much drive space is being used. This time it's 1.7 gigs. All right. Okay, so now that we're on this screen here, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and install our graphical user interface. You can cheat and restart that selection that we skipped past in the initial installation by invoking task select or task cell. I'm going to put in our password. If I learn to type it correctly. Okay, so that will restart this screen right here that you've seen in the initial installer. But this is kind of cheating and it defeats the purpose of what we were actually wanting to do. So, but this does give me the opportunity to show you how to navigate a 2E again. So up and down arrows, tab, and enter. So that takes us back out. We're going to do things a little bit more difficult. That's going to be a sudo apt update first of all. What this does is it pulls in and updates the repo files. So once that's done, Control L to clear the screen. Sudo apt install. Now I'm going to install the recommended files for this too. So it will not only install the packages I tell it, but their dependencies and the recommended packages as well. It will create a little bit more of a more complete experience when we're done. However, if you want to, you can omit that install recommends switch there and just play around with it from there. Linux is about exploring anyway. So what we need is we need the xserver xorg. Now what I did there is I just type xse and hit tab. If you hit tab twice, it'll list the packages that start with whatever it is you're searching for. So xse is all of those there. But I want xserver, sorry, and all of those packages are here. That list will narrow down. Okay, so if I type xo and hit tab again, it completes xorg for me and gets to the next ambiguous point. Tab twice again. And there's all of those that start with xserver-xorg. I'm going to clear that out because that is exactly what I'm wanting. And then I want xinit. Then we're going to do xfce4, xfce4-goodies. This will bring in some erroneous little applications that kind of fill in your experience to make it a little less minimalistic. Okay, and then I want to do xfce4-whisker menu. I'm sorry, helps if you spell it right. xfce4, WH and hit tab. And it's going to bring in the whisker menu plugin, which I'll show you what that looks like here. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and hit enter. It's going to collect all those packages, and it needs 231 megabytes of archives. After the installation, it will take up an additional 832 megs of space. So your desktop environment is 832 megs of space, which is slightly smaller than the default Windows 10 installation by a factor of 10. Anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and it's going to download all those, and I'm going to pause the video until it's done. Okay, now that's done, what we're going to do is we're going to do our trusty old Control L to clear the screen. You can also have the word clear and hit enter, and it does the same thing. All right, so once that's done, we're going to sudo reboot. All right, notice the bootloader has changed a little bit here. It's now got a wallpaper on it, so it's not the blue on the black screen. And when this is done, this should take us directly to our login screen. TL and our favorite password. All right, and that drops us right on the desktop, right exactly where we're supposed to be, which completes the mission. And if you want to stop here, you can. However, if you watched this far, let me go ahead and give you a little bonus material here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some modifications. I am going to open panel preferences. All I did here is on this bar up here, I hit right click, panel preferences. Now the panel at the top is panel 1, panel at the bottom is panel 2. I'm going to delete panel 2. Obviously you can keep it, this is your preference. Then I'm going to unlock and move panel 2 or 1 to the bottom. This way it looks a little bit more Windows-like by the time we're done. And I didn't go all the way to the bottom. Oh, there we go. Now stay there. Must be some issue with the way the virtual machine is drawing it. Okay. Well, anyway, remember I installed Whisker menu, and what Whisker menu is a replacement for this default start menu down here at the bottom. You don't need to use it if you don't want, but what we're going to do in here is we're going to replace it. We're going to show you how modular this entire operating system is, and that is done over here on item screen. Lower right hand corner you see Linux Tech Life. I don't need those buttons. All it is this right here. Lock, switch user, suspend, shut down, log out. I never use those, so I will remove them. Just that simple. Now one thing I will do is on this power, what I want to do is open settings, and I go over here to display, and I want to turn the slider all the way down while leaving power management on. What this does is it prevents your computer from going to sleep. I no longer need that, so I will remove it. And there it goes. Now this workspace switcher here actually controls these 4 gray boxes down here, and each one of these are virtual desktops. Ultimately, I'm only going to need one. I don't use virtual desktops. Again, all of this is optional. If you want to keep it there, you can, but I don't want it there. So onto the Whisker menu. I'm going to add an item, and we're just going to start typing the word Whisker. And we're going to add and then close. Notice it added it over here at the very end. Okay, so I'll show you the difference. On this one here, this is what this normal menu looks like, or the default menu, I should say. The Whisker menu looks like this. To me, it's a little bit more user-friendly, and it's a little more modern than the standard like Windows 95, Windows, XP kind of menu. But what we want to do is we want to take it up to the top of the list, which is going to move it over there, and then we're going to take the Applications menu and remove it. All right, so now we have our Whisker menu over here. And you can put it anywhere you want. You can actually move it back down the list and put it here in the center if you want. So that's what we're going to do there. All of those are fine. Click close. Let's remove some of this stuff off the desktop. That's going to be a right click on the desktop, desktop settings, icons, and down here where it says default icons, I never like those. If you just want to keep your trash and any removable drive that you plug in, like a USB or an external drive, you can go ahead and do that too. Personally, I never use any icons on my desktop. It's just a personal preference. In here you can also change your background if you have more backgrounds installed. There we go. So that looks a little bit more to my liking. Okay. You can choose your themes. You can choose all kinds of stuff. Currently, there's nothing really installed on this. This is just a very basic vanilla XFCE. No additional wallpapers, no additional themes or anything like that. How we do that is all coming up in a future video. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for watching and have a great day.